So we've got our hook and the vise, and we're going to start with a 70 denier black thread, starting from behind the bead and then working your way down to the bend of the hook. That's just going to put a good thread layer down. And you can cut off your tag. And the first thing that we're going to be using is, I like to do just a little tiny bump of dubbing. So this is just hare's mask, olive. I really like the nature spirit stuff. The original John Barr's version, I do think he used a synthetic peacock, but we're just going to sub it out today for olive dubbing. So I'm just going to do an itsy bitsy amount there at the very back of the hook, and all that's going to do is help create a bump for our goose biot tails, which is the next ingredient. And that'll help them splay out really well, and they won't get matted together or anything like that. So with the goose biots, it's a pretty simple, common material. You're just going to cut two off and then take the pointy part going towards the back of the fly, and you're just going to tighten it down. I do like the tail will be eventually like about half the length of the body of the fly. And I always just tie in one and tie in the other because I would rather it be perfect than be focusing on speed for right now. So just match that second one. And as you can see with the little bump that we tied in first, it's causing those to splay out really well. And it's kind of like the lazy way of doing that, because you can get the same effect just with the biot, but it takes a little bit more manipulation. And I don't even worry about trimming these. I just fold them back and then tie that down as well. It helps give a good profile to this bug. Keeps it nice and thick. You could trim them if you want it to be really, really thin, but I don't care as much. So now we've got our ultra wire. This is just small gold, the common stuff. Tie that in on our side of the hook shank, and we're just going to wrap it all the way down to the tail. And this is where we're going to grab our dubbing and just go back at it, dubbing not all the way, but about 80% of the hook. Now it's going to be dubbed. Again, John used, Mr. Barr, I should say, used a synthetic peacock variation. So this is a little bit different from the original recipe, but that's just because I kind of burned through these, and I like it with just the olive. But so we're going to go ahead and counter wrap the dubbing with the wire. If I can get that thing, playing around with this camera makes life exciting. So we've got that wrapped all the way up, counter wrapped. I always do a couple extra just to give it some, fraction of more weight, and then we're going to wrap back. And one of the tricks with wrapping back is I always like giving myself a little bit more space when I'm wrapping back, just to make sure that the wing case is actually visible. So then we're going to tie in a pearl tinsel. This is medium. This is another variation from John Barr's original pattern, because I think he used like an extra small or a fine, and he would just do one itsy bitsy little sliver of this stuff, whereas on this one we're going to do a little bit more flash. It will be seen. And here's another one. I add some of this stretch flex, and so what that does is it gives it the epoxy that we're going to put on a really good base, but it also gives a really good contrast to the fly, because rather than looking down and you would see the olive with the strip, you'll look down and you'll see this really dark layer that's contrasted well with the shiny material or with the flash. I'm back at it with the dubbing. And I don't go too crazy on this amount of dubbing because we're going to tie in some legs as well. So this is just kind of enough to create a little bit of a wider profile, but it's not going to make our legs shoot 90 degrees off the fly. And the legs is just going to be a partridge feather. Just strip off all of the fluff, and might pull off a couple more of those like really not stiff fibers. It's like they're not webby, but they're just not the caliber that I'm looking for. And then I'm going to stroke back those fibers with my left hand and take my scissors. I'm going to cut off the tip because I don't need that. And however many of these legs you add is however many are going to be in the fly. So if you don't want a lot of legs, don't use a lot of feathers. If you want a ton of legs, then use more feathers. But this is probably one of the trickiest parts of this pattern, which is holding those into place. So my left hand is not moving, it's just pinched down. So every thread wrap that I just made, put those right into place on either side of the fly. You can see on the far side, one of those was kind of shooting up just a little bit, but that'll be corrected when we go and put the wing case in just a second. So I'm just kind of cutting the feathers, and then I'm going to hold the wing case up. And I do give it a good stretch, and you'll watch that far side feather just kind of fall into place. There that goes. So do 1 wrap, 2 wraps, and then we're going to grab the flash or the tinsel, and we're going to hold it up and do another pretty tight 1 wrap, holding it into place because I want that centered, and 2 wraps, and that's going to hold it really well as long as you do tight wraps. And I'm going to come in here and cut this off, and I kind of do a V, so that way when the epoxy's in, it gives it even a cooler little profile, just one of those little things. And so you can see it's out of focus a little bit, but you can see I like a thicker flashback on these things. So I took the 2 portions of it and widened it out. And then we've got our Solarez. This is the thin hard. I do like this stuff a lot. I use it a lot. So we're just going to whip finish. I'll just whip finish once because the epoxy will hold everything into place. And come on the underside and cut that off. So now you could fish a fly like this if you wanted to, but it will fall apart in time. It takes 1 or 2 fish. So we'll take that epoxy and going to put a glob, not too crazy, but enough to cover everything. And then I grab the bodkin or a needle or any sort of fine little tool, and I'm just going to kind of spread that out over the wing case. And eventually, it goes to almost like the base of the feathers, which is fine too, because that holds them into place. And then we're going to grab our black light, and that is the finished fly. Now, there's all sorts of variations you could do on this, but that is it. And it works real well.